Welcome to the Uplift, where we are uplifting our lives, uplifting each other, and uplifting our communities together. Thank you for joining myself, Cy Herrera, and Tessa Savala here, two women, two attorneys, doing it our way, and inviting you here each week to share in on the stories, advice, and life lessons we've picked up along our journeys that keep us uplifted, and that will hopefully do the very same thing for you. Now buckle in and let's get ready to be uplifted.
Good morning, Cy.
Good morning, Tessa.
So I thought we were talking today about advice and good advice that has followed us through our lives. And I think that changes as what the advice we needed as a, elementary school student is much different than the advice we need today as professional women.
Yes.
But what is the first piece of advice that you can remember receiving that was helpful and has carried with you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is some advice that my grandmother would give, my grandma Vicky. I'll be talking about her a lot. And she just really kind of gave us the sense that, no one is above you. You're not above anyone else, that you have value wherever you are and whoever you're talking to. And so that really, really carried with me. I think that it's one of those things that just gives you a sense of confidence when you are in new situations. And I was in new situations a lot as a kid since I moved out. I moved around a lot.
That is excellent advice.
How about you? What can you remember?
My grandmother in Sweden, who I called mor, which in Swedish means mother's mother. So we differentiate between mother's mother and father's mother, which is far more, which is really helpful in conversation, right? So you understand which grandmother you're speaking of.
Yeah.
So my mor used to say to me, Tessa hon kan, which means Tessa, she can, literally. And to me, the advice was, I can try anything. I can do anything I put my mind to, and there is no limit upon me. And I think that is so different in that experience than it was as a child when we moved to the United States, where I felt like there was always limits placed on women. And that freeing differentiation between culture was so great to me, knowing that the Swedish part of me had no limits placed upon me, even though as living in America, it was like the dress code is about what girls can and cannot do. Girls should be nice. Girls shouldn't speak up. Girls shouldn't be as smart as boys. Girls can't be good at math. Like all those things that are ingrained upon young women.
Wow, so powerful. I love that. And it really complements, the advice that I got, and that it just makes you, both of those make you feel like, it's almost like a preparation, right? It's almost like an armor going in and knowing that I think both of them knew that this is what you're going to face, right? And I'm sure they both faced all of those things in their generation, and having that armor going in, it really puts you in a different position, because I think one of the big things that happens with people going, through their childhood or even in their later years, when you're in a new situation, when you're in a new environment, when you're, faced with a new challenge, I think one of the hardest things is that you're not prepared. You've never seen it before. You've never been there before. But when you have this armor of an experienced person on you, and you're walking in with certain presumptions that are preparing you for the situation before you even know what you're walking into, I think it can set you up for success, definitely.
I agree completely. And I think about how often we are hard on ourselves. And I think we almost need that positive advice and like a supply and a well of it to counteract all the times that we are hard on ourselves, or we think others are hard on ourselves.
Or, yes, we're hard on ourselves, but where is that coming from? And I think that is the most interesting thing, is that we think it's coming from us, right? And so it
Mm-hmm.
must be true. And that's the power, right? That's the power of all these subliminal messages that we're getting, because nobody came up to you, Tessa, and said, I doubt, I hope not, that, you can't be good at math. No one told you that out loud and outright, right? So where are you
They
getting
did
that
actually.
message? They did. Oh no, that's even worse. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many other examples, right, where folks are signaling to
Yeah.
you something, right? And as social animals, we are built to pick up on that social messaging. And and then if one of the social messages is that you should be a pleaser, that you should be trying to, that you have to get people to like you, that you have to be nice and not mean, all of these different subliminal messages, then you're more likely to internalize all of that. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that you gotta have, I love what you said, you gotta have this well, of positivity and strength that you can draw from for every step of the way. And, even though our grandmothers might be gone, that still is there. And I think that's incredibly powerful and shows how, that can live on through generations.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that can be adapted by anyone who has kind of experienced that feeling on the outside where you're not part of the mainstream culture who seems to have this. I don't know. For me, it seems like sometimes I look at people and I think, wow, they just believe that they deserve to be there, even
Mm.
though it
Mm-hmm.
appears that they do not deserve to be there from a merit standpoint, right?
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, it's so much interesting psychology in there for me. I think there's so much interesting psychology there because, you know, I mean, my husband sometimes says that art is what you can get away with. And I think that life is an art in that way, right? So if you can
Yeah,
project the strength, if you can project this confidence, if you can project this security in yourself and where you are going, other people buy into it. And so I
yeah,
think that is really important. And so, these pieces of advice, these pieces of wisdom that were shared with us, I think those are actually playing into that very thing where if you're carrying that with you walking in, people will believe it. If you believe
absolutely.
it, people will believe it. So it just shows how much more powerful that those pieces of advice really turned out to be.
It's fascinating what you just said about how if you believe it, other people will believe it. I
Mm-hmm.
read this article, in, I think it was in New York Times once, about Marilyn Monroe interviewed. And she was walking down the street in New York with her interviewer, and her interviewer didn't understand why everybody wasn't just like dropping everything and staring at her.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, it's because of the way I'm walking. And he
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand what she meant. And she said, I'm just walking like a normal human being. I don't have like my shoulders back and my hips swaying dramatically. And so
Mm-hmm.
she turned to him and said, watch this. And she, pulled herself up, kind of arched her back, started swaying her hips, and instantaneously everybody paid attention. And so it really is about, what you're portraying to society and how
Uh-huh.
it can turn on a dime.
And to me, I think, speaking about childhood is is really interesting because I think as an adult, you become more cognizant of it, possibly, right? Like when you start
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, body language and all, what are you projecting? And now with social media, the image, that you're creating, right, for yourself in the
Yeah,
world. But when you're a child, yes, you're self-conscious, you're thinking about how you look sometimes, sure, but I don't think you're thinking about things in that regard, right? You're not thinking about body language when you're in elementary school. you're,
or the reaction of others. Yeah,
yes, yes, exactly. And so, I mean, it's just there's not that analytical phase yet. And so, I think that the advice is so critical because it is preparing you, basically to play this, this social game before you really know the rules. And, and it really puts you in a position to, to be yourself and not be apologetic for it and to feel confident that you can do anything. I love that.
yeah. And I think, the first time I think I understood that there was this kind of like societal game that had to be played
Mm-hmm.
was actually watching a film called Working Girl, which happens to be one of my favorites. And it's not just because the main character is named Tess. I actually legitimately like it. It's great advice. So the theory in the film is that there's this woman, Tess, who's a secretary to a woman who is in mergers and acquisitions in New York. The Her boss takes a vacation, injures herself, and Tess kind of fills in. She
Mm-hmm.
has this idea that she'd presented to her boss, and her boss kind of passed it over. She discovers that her boss was trying to work this deal, and so Tess decides to start working the deal herself and realizes as an outsider she has to kind of bend the rules. And it's a story about not only how she figures out how to bend the rules, but it's a story about how she figured out how to make it happen in a way that was outside the normal structure of how deals are made.
Mm.
And you saw not only her thinking being different, but also how she was treated being different. And in the end, she, comes out victorious because it's a happy Hollywood ending to it all. But it was an interesting kind of perspective of not only how you are perceived, but how you bringing in a confident skill set can change the dynamics of a situation.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I love that. That's intriguing. Because I mean we've been focusing on, the projection, right, of it all and kind of the attitude and the confidence that's being portrayed, but you know, where is that coming from? And also, what else are you bringing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of speaks to both of those things. Like you said, there are some people that are out there kind of on confidence alone, or
Right.
they've been able to make it far just portraying and projecting the sense of confidence with maybe not enough to back it up. But in this case, somebody who was creative, somebody who had a skill set that they felt confident enough to, test out,
Mm-hmm.
that didn't ask really for permission to do it. I love all of that. I love all of those parts of that story.
But this something that I heard, I think, for the first time when I started working in politics, that asking for permission, but instead asking for forgiveness instead of asking
Mm-hmm.
for permission, right? And I think
Yes.
that's a high hurdle. I don't know. I don't know if it's something that is taught to a certain group of people growing up in the United States,
Mm.
or if it's not. I certainly didn't learn the ask for forgiveness instead of permission as like a default structure. Did you?
Yeah, no, no, no. It's something I heard, far later in life.
Yeah.
I think that I honestly, my opinion is coming up in the U.S. system. It's really everything is you're conditioned to, be a rule follower.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your path. Go to college, get this kind of thing, then you get this kind of job. Everything is very linear, which is
Yes.
interesting because there's so many, there's a spirit in America that there's so many, incredible come up stories, right?
Right.
Entrepreneurs, rags to riches. Like there's this whole other story that's happening in America, but what's taught is not that. I don't think what's taught is that. I think that there's a safe path that you're taught. This is the safe way to go. And people are, generally risk averse, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think you're encouraged through the system that this is the way to go. And honestly, I do believe that it limits people.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting parameters on their own mind,
Mm-hmm.
on what is possible, right? Just like your grandma said, you can do anything, right? And
Yeah.
so I think people say that, like I remember hearing people say that when I was growing up, like you can be anything you want to be, for example. But one of the things that I would say, not so much as something I got as advice, but something that I observed from my childhood, is that when somebody tells you you can be anything you want to be, they have every good intention of saying, like, I believe in you. I think that you could really do anything in the world. However, when you are in a place, an environment that is limited in its scope of possibilities, then your mind can only be expanded that far, right? Unless you have some external sources, some other exposure, whether it be through books or travel or through people showing you something different. I think that that is a really big lesson I took from my childhood, is that just simple exposure and being able to see what else is out there and being able to see yourself in those other things is, I think, really amazing. Like even the movie that you talked about, it could be that. It could be traveling and just seeing how other people are living, and maybe that's the kind of life you want, and then you learn about how they got there, right? Or, a business owner, if you've never been around a business owner, you might only know people that are workers and employees, and that
Right.
might be the only thing that you're training your life up to be, and your mentality to be. So I think in general, exposure is so important. I feel like one of the lessons I learned just from life, when I was in law school, was that exposure, again, is so important. When I, for the first time, seen a Latina judge, it was the first time in my life, and I'm already, in my mid-20s at this point. Never occurred to me, but when I seen this Latina judge, I thought, oh, I can be a judge. And I never thought that before that moment.
Yeah, I have a friend who describes that feeling of how we either don't allow ourselves, or we don't have a community around us that is expansive to allow ourselves to see the
Mm.
opportunities before us as
Hmm.
crabs in a bucket, right? And it's so easy to be that crab that gets pulled back down, to understand the parameters that have been set for us and our
Mm.
similar beings, as
Hmm.
opposed to being the crab that reaches the top of the bucket and can see the expanse of limitless opportunities that are before us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really speaks to me. I grew up in, I don't know what you would call it, a Rust Belt city, mid-sized city, and post-industrial wasteland, sometimes I call it. Um, but I grew up in the city where it wasn't a small town. It wasn't a rural small town of a few hundred people. It was a pretty good sized city in regards to population. But I would always say that we have a pretty big city, but it's small minded.
Yeah.
And and the reason I would say that is because, one of the wonderful gifts my parents gave me is that they would find a way to travel, even though we didn't have a lot of money at all. They would find a way. They would find a way to get us in a car and just travel across the country and just drive and just see new things, even if they were free things. Going to the beach is free, different things like that. We
Right.
would find something, to do that was meaningful, and and so when I would come back, it just, if I feel like it's like a crab that came out of the bucket and came back to the bucket and realized, oh, this is a very small bucket. There's a bunch of other stuff outside this bucket, guys, right? But people that have not seen it, I mean, I can't tell you how many people from my hometown had never left my hometown. And that would, just shock and awe me, because I'm like, you could get in your car and you could be in Chicago in a few hours, like one of these big major
Yeah.
cities in our country, like you could do that and you've not even done that. Like that's bananas. So, but it's the mentality. It's not the physical limitations. It's really
Hmm.
not. And that was even more apparent when I seen that, one of my own aunts was like, why, how are y'all traveling so much and we don't travel? And my mom's like, it's not because of the money. You definitely have more money than us. So it just kind of painted this picture, like it's all about your mentality. It is how you choose to see the world. But I mean, even as I'm speaking of that, it makes me think the exposure to different mindsets is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important, and just one person can make all the difference. And I think that that is, probably why our grandmothers are so important to us, because they had this just different perspective. They thought differently than other people, and that is, what sticks with us. That's what makes us think differently, and I hope that it's something that we can share through this podcast to lift other people through their lives and through the difficult situations that they might face.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about what you just said about the mentality of it. The next piece of advice I remember in my life that was very meaningful was from a complete stranger. Well, a stranger to me. It was
Mm-hmm.
during a bar review course in San Francisco. So hundreds of people were packed in this auditorium for this bar review course. And a UC Berkeley professor said basically, don't freak out. You can do it. And the bar exam is obviously mental with 3 days of testing in California.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's something that I tell myself a lot, right?
Mm.
For any situation that I walk
Yeah,
into, don't freak out. You can do it. And I think
absolutely. Yeah.
we either aren't told that enough, we don't believe it, or we put pressure on ourselves because we think other people are thinking other things about us, and they're probably not.
That makes me think of another piece of advice that I picked up not too long ago, which was that what other people think of me is none of my business.
I think that is really good advice. I think of it from pop culture in Schitt's Creek, where one of the characters says to the other, uh, "People are not thinking about you the way you are thinking about you."
Exactly. Exactly. No, but I mean it is important, right? I mean
Hmm.
there's so much. This rolls into so many things for me. It really does because it's getting to my life philosophy, frankly, right? Um, and I mean I think our life philosophy kind of is kind of molded from all of these bits of advice and the way that we kind of test those bits of wisdom in the real world, right? And we see whether or not they're really true or whether or not they ring true in the situations that we experience in life. Um, but my philosophy is really you create your destiny, right? And I seen a great quote the other day that said you create your destiny, and fate is something like fate is what is when you waste the opportunity to create your destiny or something like that. And I really deeply believe that because when you are going through life and you are deciding, what you are worthy of, that's really how your life, I think, is crafted. I really believe that. A lot of people going back again to my hometown, they just don't believe, oh, I could never afford to live here. I could never afford to move there. I couldn't do that, right? And
Hmm.
my mentality was like, well, other people are doing it. And again, going back to my grandma's first advice, like, they're no better than I am. They're no really
That's
different
right.
than I am, right? And like having that mentality of like, if they can do it, I can do it. Let me just go ahead and try. I think that,
Hmm.
all of that plays together to say, like, this is the life that you have to create. No one else is doing anything, no one else is better than you in some way where you can't do what they're doing. And just, kind of go for it and don't be afraid. And I think fear is another big thing that just plays into every step of every choice that you make in life. And so I don't know if it was like explicit advice, just like the rest of society. I think that there are people in our lives that signal things to us, that pass on something to us that is not necessarily words of advice, but rather a state of being, right? And I think that
Hmm.
that fearlessness is definitely something that I seen in my grandmother and my mother as well, other role models in my life where I just said, wow, they're just doing it. They don't care. They're not asking for permission. They are
Yeah.
not, it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter if they look like the people that they're emulating. One of the funny things I remember still, I mean, she still is this way, but my mom always looked at what she would call like rich people, just like if they're doing it, I'm going to do that. If they have that for their kids, I'm going to have that for my kids. And it just cracked
Hmm.
me up because I just thought like, she picked her role models. She didn't just limit them to the people directly in front of her. And I think that that mindset probably, again, came down from my grandmother, but it's just a matter of choosing, what you allow really to really seep into your psyche actually. But the more conscientious you are about it, I think the more intent you can have in creating the life that you want.
And it seems to me when you're making that choice, you need that well that is full with information and advice that
Mm,
allows you to be fearless and allows you to not place limits upon yourself, right? Because it would have been such an easier choice probably for your mom to just emulate the people around her than to look outside of that circle.
absolutely, absolutely. And not to say that, fearlessness is just as easy as making a choice. I think when you talk about the well, it's that you have to keep visiting that well to get through the tough stuff, right? Like when you
Mm-hmm.
talked about the bar, I mean, I got triggered, I think, because
Who
that was a
doesn't get
hard
triggered?
thing. Yeah, like I mean, the bar itself the test was so hard. But law
Mm-hmm.
school for me was really difficult too. And I just remember thinking like, can I do this? Like when I went to go apply for law school, I was just like, hey, other people do it, and I went with that like bravery of just like, if they can
Mm-hmm.
do it, I can do it. And that helps you to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
But then when you're faced with the challenges that are very, I mean, law school is extremely challenging for me. I didn't know any attorneys. I didn't have anybody to advise me or mentor me about what to expect. I mean, everything was just new and intense, and it was really hard. And
Same here.
yeah, and so when I talked to my mom, she's my best friend, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I literally was struggling to just like, keep eating and keep going and things like that. And she would just give me, well, that's good advice for this episode too. She would give me advice like, look in your bag, find a snack, eat whatever is in there, carry the stuff with you, and it literally would help me keep going. But she also would tell me things like that were a broader perspective on the world, which this is just something that sticks out in this moment. I'm compelled to say that when I was in law school, I remember thinking, I'm failing, I'm not getting A's. I'm not doing what I usually do. I'm a straight A student. I'm a 4.0 type student. This is not me. I'm not making it. And I told my mom, like, this is hard for me. It's hard for me to not get an A in every course. And she said, all you have to do is pass. She just said, all you have to do is pass and get that law degree, and you can make a difference. Because the whole reason I went to law school was to try to make a difference, for communities that are often marginalized. And so when she told me that, it gave me the confidence to just not feel defeated. And in that moment, that's what I needed. I needed to hear that, like, it was okay, that I wasn't a failure to her. I wasn't a failure to my community. And I shouldn't consider myself a failure, to me, that just being there and showing up and doing everything I can to make it through to the other side was good enough.
I had a similar experience in law school and was fortunate enough to have a professor who took me under his wing. And we both shared a passion for politics,
Mm,
he having run some of Bill Clinton's campaigns. And I think you need that experience in law school, especially when you're somebody who doesn't come from a lineage of lawyers.
right.
It doesn't even understand, wait, there needs to be outlines. What are these outlines? Right? Like
Exactly.
all the basics of law school that you're like,
Yeah,
And all these other kids walk in thinking they already know all this stuff because, their
right.
brother or their cousin or their best
Yep.
friend already went to law school. And
Hmm.
it's a challenge when you're not that person who knows what to expect.
Yeah.
But finding that person who's able to help you through and give you that type of advice, I mean, that is career changing
Hmm.
information, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's you just pass, that's all you need to do, or you find a professor who's like, you got this. Let's just talk about it. And takes the time to talk about it one on one with you.
I'm curious, Tessa, if you can talk more about how you found that mentor. I know you're saying he took you under his wing, but did you do anything, to foster that relationship? Did it happen organically? I'm
It
very
happened,
curious for people. Yeah.
sure. For me, it happened really organically. I got very, very ill within the
Mm.
first month of law school
Oh
to the
no.
point where I needed to be hospitalized for a kidney infection that
Wow.
I'd never had before.
Mm.
And so everything turned out fine. But it was, how do you take a month, like, I think it was 10 days I was out of class.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Which is
two
like
full
a
weeks.
year in law school, yeah.
hmm At the beginning of law school,
Oh,
when you're
wow.
still trying to figure it out. And I was intimidated by this professor. He was, I think viewed as kind of this grouchy curmudgeon.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And he, and all my professors at the law school were very compassionate about what was happening and very helpful. But, he just one, there was something about him that it just clicked. It was just conversations of trying to catch up from being out. And he and I discovered a shared love of politics. And I'm
Mm.
guessing maybe some of the other professors weren't into politics as much as he was. And
Mm.
it just bonded over, what you would with any friend, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do you have in common?
See, and that's, I mean, there's an important lesson in there, I think, again, to the point of, this, you could have very well been intimidated by this person. You could have possibly never, got close to this person. You wouldn't have benefited from all of the things that you benefited from in this relationship. But in my mind, that speaks again to the fact that you were able to put yourself on kind of equal footing with this person in the sense of, we're both people that care about this common thing and we can talk to each other, as equals essentially. And that's important. I think that a lot of people a lot of people get caught up in titles, in,
Mm-hmm.
these societal roles and positions that we put ourselves in, and everything is a hierarchy, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if you can take the mindset that, you have value, you are a person that can speak with this other person on the same level. I remember, this is so random, but someone once told me something that really stuck with me. And I think it was because they seen how I was, maybe in this place where I'm thinking these professors, they're so far above me. And not that they aren't and that you shouldn't have respect for them, but someone said, in a couple years, you're going to have the same degree that they have. And I thought that that was really fascinating because we get caught up, right? Like we really get caught up in like the pieces of paper that people have or the initials that they have after their name or even their experience that they have. I think that we should all always reflect on the fact that we all have this very special value and that there's no one else in the world that has had the same life experience as you. And so you
And
bring that with you.
I think oftentimes, especially in, I think, changes in hierarchy and how does a student consider herself, able to have a conversation as equals with the professor,
Mm-hmm.
you have to strip away that kind of
Yeah.
accolades that society's placed on you. And
Yeah.
I think what really helped me is growing up, my Aunt Birgitta in Sweden would always host these large, extravagant
Mm-hmm.
family dinners with,
Mm-hmm.
like multiple wine glasses and silverware out to the yin yang to the left and to the right. So,
Nice.
but there was never a kids' table. So the
Ah,
kids were always at the table and the
nice.
kids were always participating in conversation. And you started understanding like how you, even as like a 5-year-old, could fit into a conversation with adults.
Mm. Mm.
And I think that probably was a skill set that I can thank her for the rest of my life because it taught me that, you can find common ground. Granted, those were my relatives, so of course there's common ground. But at the same time, I think it helped with that professor because I
Yeah.
understood if I move it out, if the conversation moves out away from the hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
there we
Mm-hmm.
can find common ground without the hierarchy
I
playing a
love that.
major
Yeah.
role.
I mean, I feel like I could use that advice right now in my life. Because you have to be reminded. It kind of reminds me of meditation where it's like, yes, your brain, your thoughts are going to wander, and then your job is just to notice that and bring
Mm-hmm.
it back to center. And it's the same kind of thing with this. It's like, yes, you're going to get caught up in all of the accolades and all of this, societal structure that has been placed out. And then you have to remember, like, oh, that really, mostly meaningless. And just remind yourself that you're just
Yeah.
talking to another person and you're a
Yeah,
perfectly interesting and great person too. And that they're just people talking to people, and that you can always find common ground in the humanity that connects us. I love that story.
exactly. I mean, and this was one of those professors that was, fellowship to someone else's name and
Hmm.
written a textbook. So there was
Oh,
every
wow.
reason in the world for me to be like, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, this little girl from Sweden doesn't need to be sitting in this office having these conversations.
But she does, and that's, I think, like, let's all affirm each other right now and say, you deserve to be in the room. You
Yeah,
deserve to be talking to this person. Why? Not because you have this or that or this accomplishment or this act. It's just because you're you, and you have value in your
hmm,
perspective, in your experience, in your life,
absolutely.
in whoever you are. You have value, and we just have to keep reminding each other, I think, in every scenario, because so many different times where you will be challenged on that, where you will be made to feel small, where you'll be made to feel like you should count yourself out before somebody else does.
Or that you
And
don't
yeah,
deserve a seat at the table.
and you don't deserve a seat. Yeah.
And I think the table has room for everybody because we all bring something different.
Absolutely. And if no one's making room, you should make room for yourself.
Absolutely. Bring your chair and drag it up there.
Most definitely. Because, I mean, together we are the most powerful thing, right? We're the most powerful force together. I don't know that anyone can claim that, less voices make more sense. That
Yeah.
would be a hard argument.
Hmm.
I mean, everything points to that, right? It's backed up even by the science. But I mean, it's true even like tested in your life. And, let's say you have a hard situation in life. I have a hard situation, a decision to make right now. And what do? Do we sit and think just to ourselves and make a decision? Which way is a better way? And I would argue that most people kind of have their own little personal advisory board. And if you don't have one, I suggest you get one. Um,
Agree.
yeah, but I mean, everyone kind of does, right? Like you call your
Hmm.
mom, you call your best friend, you call maybe your mentor, you call the people that have always been there for you in your life and that you trust and respect their opinion. And that
Or
doesn't
I
mean
call
that you,
you. Hmm.
yeah, and I call you because that's true, right? And even though we believe ourselves to be smart and we believe in ourselves and all of that good stuff, it doesn't mean that there's not value, right? In checking yourself against other people, in getting their perspective, right, and how they
Hmm.
see the situation, and especially when you find people that love you or care about you, even in the professional sense, um, then you can trust them that they, want what's best for you, and that maybe whatever you're thinking, you want to challenge it just to exercise that perspective swapping and seeing it from someone else's eyes and seeing what
Yeah.
really makes sense in that situation.
And I think you just gave some really good advice about making sure everybody has that kind of
Mm,
board, sounding board to talk through situations because of that very reason that someone else in your, peanut gallery could offer a viewpoint that you might not see. And it could be a reason to affirm your decision, or it
mm-hmm.
could be a reason for you to question your decision. And we should be equally open to both.
Absolutely. And I mean, challenging your perspective is so important because even if you, like you said, end up on the same decision, now you've kind of put it through the ringer, right? And now you
Mm-hmm.
feel even better about it because you're like, hey, it stood the test of of all of this checking with everybody and seeing where everyone lands. And so I think it's so important to have that and be cognizant of it because, when there are tough situations out there, I think sometimes we might even forget, like we might get caught up in the emotion of it, like, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm going to tell my girlfriend about it, I'm upset or whatever. You might get caught up in the emotion of it, but the actual issue, like, let somebody else play with it, let somebody else tell you their perspective, and have that group
Mm-hmm.
of people. And if you don't have it, build that group of people that you can count on all the time, that you can trust, that each of them cares for you, and that they will give you they'll give you their real opinion that is really centered on you and what's best for you.
And I think for all those people who are afraid of building those relationships or finding those relationships, know that even in like the qualitative world of game theory, it tells you that if you're asked somebody for a favor, you're going to build a better relationship.
Yes,
Because you're asking for
absolutely.
that help and advice from a person.
Yep. All that psychology transfers so well. It makes me think of my fundraising brain now. And in my fundraising work, the best predictor of a gift is a recent gift, right? So if you've gotten someone to give you a small gift, the next time you talk to them, they're more likely to give you another one because they're invested, right? And the saying goes, don't ask, if you want money, ask for advice.
Yep.
and it's because, people feel emotionally invested in what you're doing and what we're talking about. And so, the beautiful thing about friendships is that they're forever perpetuated, right? By this kind of symbiotic thing where, I help you with my perspective and my advice, and then you help me in that way. And it's a beautiful thing in that you can both feel supported, you can both get value in this relationship, and that you have somebody just to listen, like you said about soundboarding. I mean, someone to listen to you is so important. I mean, I think that was one of the most beautiful gifts my grandma gave me, is that we could just talk for hours. And it was an awesome thing. I hope that people still have that. I feel like people probably talk less on the phone and do a lot more social media these days and things like that. But it's a beautiful thing. And if you have somebody that you can kind of go back and forth with for a long time, that's probably a good sign that those are one of the people that really care about you.
I completely agree. And I'll add the caveat for modern technology that the conversations could occur electronically as well, if that's what everybody's into.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Don't limit yourself. I mean, I can say for sure that, some of my personal advisory board, I'm not going to get them on the phone. It's going to be a text conversation, but we've gotten pretty good at having long text conversations too. So that always works as well. Is there any other final advice, Tessa, that you just have to share with our listeners today that you really want them to maybe carry with them in their lives?
Yeah, somebody who's very important in my sounding board said to me one time, be nicer to yourself.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I take that with a lot more, I guess, acceptance than I probably did when he first said it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just growth and personal experience and confidence too, right? Like we are our own worst critics and we can be so hard on ourselves. But when everyone else isn't thinking about you the way you're thinking about you,
Right.
you don't
Right.
have to be so hard on yourself because, like your mom said, you just have to pass. Same with the day-to-day world. You just have to get through that day. So
Absolutely. And that's,
don't be
yeah.
so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
How
I
about you,
think,
Eddie?
well, that brought up a couple things for me. I've heard similar advice that was it was phrased in a way of, what advice would you give your best friend? Or, how would you tell this to your best friend? And that might have come from you, Tessa, but, that helps me. I carry that with me because, when I start doing my self-talk, we all do this self-talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think about that just to check myself. Like, am I being too hard on myself? Or, is this unreasonable? Am I, what would I tell somebody else? What would I tell, my best friend? And so I think that is, I think that's a way just to check in with yourself and make sure that you are being fair to you.
Yeah.
And you will have to do that over and over again because, again, society, the work pressure, just everybody is sending you these messages that you have to do more. You have to work hard. You have to work long, whatever it is. And just check it in that way. Like, is this what you would tell your best friend? Would
Yeah.
that be a reasonable thing to tell your best friend? Yeah.
I think that's excellent.
And you brought up another thing for me, but I got so enthralled in that thing that I forgot what that other thing was, but that's okay. just final advice in general, I would say, to always be open um, to the next wonderful thing that you could experience in life. Um, I think for me, what I've seen through life is that, that exposure that we talked about, that sense of, being brave enough to kind of take that new step and do something that you don't know anyone else that has done that. Um, every time you do that, it gets you a little bit farther up, the hill, or just a place where you can see beyond what you could see before. And so I would just say, don't be afraid of that. Let yourself kind of explore that, and let yourself dream about some other things that you see. And when you find yourself really admiring what someone else is doing, or, just kind of the life that they're living, if there's something that speaks to you, um, don't kind of put that in the bucket of, oh, I wish I could have that, or I wish I could do that, or I wish I could be that. Just do it. Just do it. Decide to do it. Decide to do it, because if you decide to do it, I know you can do it. It's just a matter of whether or not you know that you can do it. And so, again, it comes all the way back to the mindset and knowing that no one else is above you, but you have every right and ability to create the destiny that you deserve.
And I think for me, it would be that I want everyone to know that those inner voices that are positive influences that tell you that you can do it and you don't have any limits on yourself and that you deserve a seat at that table should be louder than
Mm-hmm.
all the questioning and all the negative advice that we hear in a day. And it has to be almost a choice, though, to choose to listen to those positive voices at some time while that well of positivity fills up. And it's not saying that
Absolutely.
negativity doesn't exist. It may not have merit at some point in time, but we can't let it settle. And you have to give more credit to the positive voices because while it might be easier to believe the negativity, the positive is the place you want to live your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And think about how that is going to impact you, right? Because when you choose to focus on the positive, when you choose to focus on all of the good things that you can offer the world, then you can lift yourself up and show the world what you have to offer. When you allow those negative voices and all of those negative forces to pull you down, then really you're denying yourself and the world, your full potential. I don't, I just, that speaks deeply to me because I believe that, nobody is, nobody has it all, right? And so it really is a choice, right? It really is a choice on, are you going to focus on what you do have and what you can offer? Or are you going to focus on the negative, literally the negative of what you do not have to offer? And it will change your life. It will change your life if you just say, this is what I have. This is what I have to bring. And I'm going to keep bringing it. No matter no matter what else is going on. And so I love that advice, Tessa. And I am going to hold on to it, and so many other great things that you were so generous to bring to this space today. Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you for reminding us that it is, I would, the, yeah, I guess I'll safely say the part of me that grew up in a socialist country, I believe we have a duty to lift
Mm-hmm.
everybody else up because it helps not only that person that we're lifting up, but also ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I personally want to live in a world where everybody's helping everyone else lift each other up to be their best selves. So thank you for reminding us that our overall goal here with our advice and the advice we've heard and how our advice can help others is that we're all lifting each other up.
Of course, of course. And thank you for being my partner in this. And thank you all for listening and being a part of this community that seeks to do that very thing.
Yes. Thank you guys.